Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. As you know, it's part of our mission to help you guys. So please send any questions you have to us at info@collegeknowledge.net. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kerins.
Good morning, Dave.
How are you?
Doing well.
Today, we have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Professor William Donaruma from none other than the University of Notre Dame, from the Department of Film, Television, and Theater. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
So, do you, first of all, William or Bill? Which do you prefer?
Bill is fine. Yeah.
All right. So,
kind of like William Shatner kind of thing. Like, friends call me
okay.
Bill.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we made that status then.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, obviously, Notre Dame, excellent institution. It's got a reputation for high academic achievement. How did you get into the film production, and what was your journey, and how did you get to Notre Dame?
Well, I came back to Notre Dame. So I graduated from Notre Dame.
Okay.
What was actually communications and theater at the time. And then I started working in production, both in Florida and Los Angeles. So I'd been doing a number of different jobs, sort of working my way through the industry. Did a lot of grip electric. I did some stunt work for a while. I did a lot of production management as part of a backlot studio organization at Universal Florida when we first started. So before it was, as big as it is now, we actually had a lot of TV shows and things that we're shooting on the lot. After I left there, you kind of get burned out. You want to do other things. You find your career going in one direction. I wanted to do more camera and editing. And then I was in Los Angeles for a while, and I was doing some effects, lighting work, and did some other management things for Universal Hollywood, and kind of bounced back and forth for a while. And then I kind of fell backwards, I think, into this career because they were then looking for somebody, Notre Dame, looking for somebody to handle, I think, a very small still, but growing production area, and needed somebody that could, do the hands-on kind of work, and managing, their production classes. And so I got called because I was still in touch with people, and they knew I was actually working in production. And so it worked out. And I was on a job actually, and I was talking about, this job, and my friends were like, "Oh, you got to get out of this freelance, rat race kind of thing. You can go, do this, this, and this." And so I was fortunate to, I think, fall into it. It was a little hard at first because I was used to getting out and doing more of the travel and doing the production, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then I built it into my own career now, because I do a lot of my own work. We were shooting film at the time here, and then, moved it into the digital age, and then, was able to kind of transition that into, just shooting a lot of my own stuff, be it, documentary. I shot a feature with a friend of mine in Chicago. We've done music videos. We've done, all sorts of things. So now I've got a few different positions here. So I'm head of production, of film production in our department. And then I also am creative director with the Office of Digital Learning. So we do productions that have educational benefit. Actually, before everybody had to go online, we were doing this.
Yeah.
So we were kind of, prepared for that. So we do like mini documentaries and things of that nature. And I also am director of the creative computing group. So I handle all of the computing systems for creative work, being editing or graphic design, animation, that kind of thing. So we install, all those systems.
Fantastic. So the transition from being out there in the general world, it sounds like you were able to continue some of that pursuit also while teaching and kind of educating others on it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of just taking the initiative and taking advantage of, I think, certain possibilities, and being able to go out and, starting small. It was a sort of a circuitous journey that, hey, I could do this. I did this documentary on this big, guy who does big, large scale sculptures. And, he came into town. It was actually the last one done on him before he passed away. And then, there's a lot of grant work involved. And I started working with a friend in anthropology. We were doing documentary work off these islands that are off the coast of Ireland. And then that kind of bloomed into a lot more European work, international work, because, you have something to show. And so, you do one thing, it's sort of transition to, take this money and go do this now. And, those kinds of things. So, and then
sounds like a good spot to be.
Relationship with, the camera company that, I brought in and then start, doing work with them as well. So, it's keeping my hands in the fold and friends that are in production and, making more friends and bring that to classroom experience.
Very cool. So, for the listeners, right, on the film, television, and theater, that department, what all is encompassed in that, and what majors are coming out of that department or that school?
I mean, Notre Dame's not. I mean, we're not known for this, but it actually is a very popular major within the college, of Arts and Letters, and we'll have a lot of double majors. People that are in, also have a business major. We're not a minor. We do have a musical theater minor. But film, television, and theater, basically, you'd major in FTT, but you'd have a concentration. So we're kind of what we call like a boutique program. So, you can be in film, you'd be studying film, you're studying television, or you're studying theater. Some people will do both. Some people come into theater just because it helps them even in their own career. Like we had somebody that did, one of the big musicals, she went on to law school because now you can, speak in front of people. So, it's a very transferable skill set that way.
Yeah.
Our program is actually more history, critical studies based. So you have a foundation in that, and then you can take production as electives. So, now we actually have an expanded faculties. We're actually offering a little bit more, but you get to do a little bit of everything. So in my classes that are upper level filmmaking classes, you're in, from the writing process into, going to shoot the movie and producing the movie and editing the movie. And so you're not kind of getting pinholed into one job necessarily, so much as you're getting the experience of everything. And then you could move on to either concentrating in industry work or grad school. But we'll have people come out, they may not, I mean, we actually have a lot of people that come out and actually get into the production field. I think people get, it's not like these automatic jobs and business and engineering. My son's an engineering major as a senior right now. And, they kind of, things get lined up. And I think there's a sense of security there, because it is, a journey, but there's a lot out there, a lot of opportunity out there. And we have a lot of students that are making the most of it. So, we really, I think, have a reputation for really solid work ethic. Work coming from the school. So we'll have there's been kind of a pipeline through DreamWorks, like they like hiring Notre Dame kids because they have a kind of a different sensibility of work versus kind of bigger programs that, I only want to do this kind of work. So it's been good that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult school to get into from a raw standpoint. So you're going to be the students that are attending are going to be upper echelon. And so you're sort of perpetuating that work ethic that comes in and making sure that it sticks. At what point in the FTT program do you switch to the more elective based stuff? So is there a core curriculum that everybody's taking freshman and sophomore year, and then junior and senior, you're really trying to focus in on what you think you enjoy out of that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a core curriculum at Notre Dame anyway. So you have to, usually freshman year is kind of set. Second semester, you get kind of an elective, and some people will take our basics course, which is kind of how to read films and basic history. That's kind of the gateway course. Some of them will also get into, if they get into production, they'll do intro to production early. So freshmen, but usually sophomores. So we'll have a larger sophomore class that will then declare and say, oh, I want to start doing more production work. But then, you're also taking Global Cinema 1, Global Cinema 2. This is in the film program. You've already taken basics, and then you take a critical approaches, which could be any number of courses that are a specialty of one of our more critical studies history faculty. And that's kind of your 4 core courses. And then you have the ability to then take like 6 then electives from there. And some of it will cross over. You might take an acting class, or something in TV, but then, within the film program, you might be doing more the production work, but which also crosses over with TV because it's really hand in hand now.
And is it, you had mentioned declaring the major in the sophomore year. Is that across the board at Notre Dame where most people are coming in undeclared, or there is no declaration until sophomore year?
Right. I mean, you don't really come in. I say, from other schools, like my son came in, like you hit the ground running in engineering. If you're in arts and letters, you can kind of explore a little bit. You might have a major, and we'll have people switching majors, or we'll have people that will add on a major even a little bit later, or they might have finished a lot of their coursework, through those 2 years. And we had an open event where people came in and they were juniors and they were like, well, now I've done all this work, but now I'm going to concentrate more on this major kind of thing. But it isn't the kind of that set slot. Like you're not going to apply to the film program. You have the opportunity to kind of explore what your options might be. In the case,
which I think is tremendous, because you're kind of getting the idea of learning how to learn at the collegiate level, and then you're then sort of enabled to make more critical decisions rather than making the critical decision that could be very wrong from from the get-go, right?
Right.
What types of, and again, I don't know what I don't know. So from the film, the television, and theater, obviously there have to be classes that everybody's going to take that apply to all 3. What are the different types of classes that, at maybe the 400 level that you would take for film versus television versus theater?
That are different?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in film and television, it's really kind of, again, concentrated on who might be doing something that is their work, their research work is more grounded in just television as a form. Versus something that is for level that would be film, like the film, music in film, or we had somebody that just concentrated on Disney, and so there were, if you have people doing different kinds of work, you can have that kind of open access to a number of different kinds of classes, but they're concentrating more on that side of things. In theater, it's the same way. I mean, you could actually be, further down doing more production in theater, like directing and such, or, we have people that are doing, work in African-American theater or, Asian theater structure, things of that nature that, kind of spread the gamut. So it's the same kind of thing that are specialty courses that, exist in that format that, you would be taking there.
Is there a required, I don't want to say thesis, but like at the end, is there some, if you want to graduate, do you have to create a film that is out there, or a TV program, or a production of one of those things?
Like a capstone project?
Yes, that would be the word.
Yeah, I mean, we have a thesis program. That, any number of majors will have. So you apply to this thesis program in your junior year and say, this is kind of the extended work I want to do. And then you'd say, if I want to make a film, here's my proposal. I've taken all these classes. I'm going to go above and beyond, where the coursework has taken me. The same thing would be true of theater. A lot of those might be written works. So they're bigger research projects. that then you might be doing some sort of multimedia, or you're doing a scene, kind of two different things. But that's essentially then above and beyond normal coursework. We would say in the production area that, if you go through the courses and you make an advanced film, that's kind of a capstone project anyway. This is kind of a label on that says, I went kind of the next step, in having done all of these courses that you could finish it, but it's not a requirement.
Okay.
You have to, it sort of gives you that extra feather in your cap.
Yeah. So, in the high school environment, we talk about the resume builder. That's something that you put on when you're trying to get that first job and say, hey, not only did I get this major, but I did this extra work, and here's the production, or here's what I did as a segue into the professional world. Yeah.
I mean, we had somebody she didn't do a thesis, but she made a film in my class. And when she was applying for jobs in, kind of a more of a producing role in a small production company, it was between her and another woman. This is a very female oriented group, company. And it came down to her having a film. The other one didn't.
Yeah.
She had already created something and made something, regardless of, how big or, festivals and things like that. It was like, oh, you have this, so you know what that process is. So that was, kind of a good precedent.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a body of work that you can present and say, hey, I've been down this road, so I understand it.
Right.
On that topic about, if we kind of go prior to like thinking about that high school side of things, well, if you're interested in potentially studying film, if that's a career or, a passion that you have when you're in high school, how important is it to have a portfolio or take classes, or how knowledgeable do you have to be? Is there prerequisites to get into a program like at Notre Dame?
Not here. I mean, people will try to submit things. I mean, I think, even in our admission process, I don't think they're taking that kind of material. It's very straightforward across the board. You're writing essays, you're doing these kinds of things. People want to submit things to us. That's really not happening much anymore, because we don't have any sway in admissions anyway. And really, when you're coming in fresh. So if you have, you have experience that kind of helps you out to kind of get through, I think, the first class, but we don't necessarily jump people along. It's sort of like, because we have our own system, we have our own cameras, we have our own software, so you're still taking those classes. And every once in a while I have somebody say, well, I've done this, and this, and you go, yeah, but get to know your classmates, because you're going to be moving up with them, and just stick with that program. So no, for us, it's not necessary. I mean, a lot of times in grad school, it becomes necessary in that way, because I have a student now that at AFI, they want you to make a 5-minute film, like within 2 months of the application. They want to see you like go out and do this. This was new to me. Found out the other day. They want to see you go out and try to make this short film pretty quick, right before that. Not something you've done during your classwork. Yeah. I can't speak to other, bigger programs. Although, I've heard things like, even at USC, if you're going to go to a USC undergrad, they basically just start everybody at ground level. Like, we're going to take you up, this kind of path. So, you can dive in whenever.
Got it. I always like to ask this question because there's always preconceived notions that a lot of parents have when their kid comes to them and says, hey, I want to go to this school, or I want to study this.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, if I said to my father when I was a senior in high school, hey, I want to study film. Well, I know his first thing is like, all right, I'm not going to say no, but what are you going to do with that? Okay. And you better go to school in California, right? Like I know that's the first thing that he would have said, because we had that conversation, right? Like, but I know that families are immediately going to have this, oh, that's what you're going to be doing. How much of that is real? How much of that is myth? What is probably some of the biggest things that you see, that whether it's students or parents, that it's just they don't have the right information? What are some of the things that you have to overcome, or students have to overcome with family and kind of decision making with all of that, whether it's school choice or that major?
Well, that's why I think we have a lot of double majors.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
You have kind of like the parent. We always have kind of the parents major, and you have what you want to do. And they might start someplace, and then they might get a blessing. Say, I just can't do this. I want to do this. They'll move over. But we have a lot of highly ambitious students anyway. So they're trying to almost do too much regardless. So we get a lot of double majors just for the fact that they think that they have to do, multiple things and give themselves options in that way. Yeah. We have people that tour all the time, and mostly it's like, I want to come to Notre Dame. But I also love film, and they're kind of exploring the program, to kind of see what it might offer. In the big scheme of things, you say, oh, well, yeah, you have to go to California. A lot of people will still go to New York. FSU is a big program now. There's a number of programs, and other even smaller schools like a Chapman or something that's in LA. Mm-hmm. That's, but the thing about that is that, when you get into those, that's kind of where you're going. That's kind of the direction you're in. We have, a motto even within our colleges, study everything, do anything. Right. Because you can, basically apply it, in any number of directions. I mean, I've done some documentary classes with anthropology. We have crossover, and they're basically medical students, school students. But then they find the kind of niche, and they go, oh, this is really great, and I want to apply that to this kind of, this kind of work. Yeah. We also have groups, and just kind of getting off track a little bit. I've done a class where kids they have to make media for something. Mm-hmm. And they're getting thrown into NGO work. And then they say, hey, can you take this camera and make a video? Because they just assume that they know how. Right. So I go through this course that was basically, if you get something thrown at you, how can you make something, and the things you have to think about so that you can make media as part of, this bigger picture that you're doing, this nonprofit. There's any number of avenues, that you can go. So it basically in our program, right? I mean, you're making media for any number of reasons. But then, within our major, you can kind of branch out in different directions.
Yeah.
Well, and I look at our business, and we're in college admissions, we're in financial planning in the insurance space, and we've got all these. And one of the things in the COVID environment, everything went to video. I mean, whether you're doing Zoom meetings, whether you're doing reels, whether you're advertising, and the expanse of advertising now has led to easier deployment of video content, which, I mean, arguably I have a producer here that we hired to do all of our video content and all of our podcasts and stuff. So to me, it's an expanding environment, not a contracting one. It's one where, I mean, you have so many ways to get videos out now, and so much production necessary to produce. So
that's one way around it. Like to answer your question, I'm trying to take my course and go in a direction that shows them it's not all about Hollywood. Mm-hmm. You could be doing this, in any number of places. I mean, I've worked with guys that have their own studio for DeWalt tools and OtterBox phone cases. Those guys go around the world telling stories of people just because they use a phone case. So you have a lot of opportunities to be in this creative field and not be in this sort of Hollywood machine. So the people that I'm working with now are kind of independent, documentary filmmakers and especially actually even wildlife filmmakers now. And, how do, people who are biologists then become, get a camera in their hands and start, making media from that. And people have had, discovered careers that way. So I really kind of go into it and say, this is a transferable skill to any number of places. You don't have to feel like, I know it feels sexy to go out and, be on these TV shows, but it's a whole other life too.
Yeah.
So, we had one of my best students is working at a company in Tampa. That's I think kind of a Catholic, media based company, that, was important work for her. And, she's applying her skill set there. So, so like you're saying, I mean, there's a lot to do beyond feeling like we're just looking at this one area.
If you didn't know, we have a free crash course on college funding at elitecollegiateplanning.com. This will explain different types of loans, types of financial aid, savings vehicles, and much more.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, like one thing, and this is free advice to anyone that listens. If your intention in life is to be an entrepreneur, you have to understand this stuff. We're not going in reverse, right? You're not going back to paper advertising. You're not going back to the cold calling as we used to know it. There's too much technology preventing you from doing that stuff. So being out there as an entrepreneur, and I know this firsthand, you have got to be willing to get in front of a camera or to have a group of people that will do that stuff for you. So it is an expanding environment without question.
Yeah, because there's so many media outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it used to be you could get on the radio, you get on the TV, or you make phone calls, right? Or you see a print ad. Well, now, I mean, there's 1,000 different places you can go and find content that has been created. And one of the things that I focused on is we were 3 years ago when COVID hit, and we had to really reinvent how we were doing business and be out in the forefront and be in people's hands on their phones and create all that. I never wanted to put out something that was garbage from an appearance standpoint, right? When you see a film or you see a reel or you see something and it just looks bad, right? That's an instant turnoff in business. And so it was always an idea of we have to make it look real, professional, and high quality to be able to, use it as copy, for lack of a better expression.
Right.
One of the other questions I was thinking about with the, again, those high school students and parents, when they're doing their college visits, I was lucky enough. I was in Notre Dame. Bill gave me a tour of the facility, and it's absolutely phenomenal. We looked at the sound stage. We looked at the equipment, the editing rooms. I mean, just a wonderful facility. But when you do a college visit and you're potentially thinking that this is a career path that may interest you, or whether it's something that you're passionate about, how important is it to understand the school's capabilities, the facilities, the equipment that they have? Like, how important should that be in a student's decision? Do you think that every school is kind of equal on that level, or there are schools that will stand out with the equipment that they will be teaching kids to use, cameras that they'll be using, software they'll be using? Again, I'm not familiar with the industry, but how important is it to know what's truly you're learning with is now what you're going to use in the field after college?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important, and that's why even in our program, I strive to make sure that they don't want to say, well, it's all about story, and say, yeah, but it's also about your experience level and the kinds of tools that you're working with, and how that transfers right away, and making it exciting. A lot of kids will get cameras in their hands, but you want to give them something that they can run with, and really understand and kind of take that to the next level. I just got I got a request for a recommendation for a student that's been out for a while. And he was talking about, we really appreciate our experience with Red cameras because this is going to transfer to my, my documentary application to Northwestern and, some other program. And it was just having that kind of experience level. I also, because I've seen where other programs, they have a big reputation, but they have also such huge numbers that you don't get your hands on a lot of the equipment, or they have like one really good camera, those kinds of things. And so access to that, I think, becomes important. So that's why, when they come and talk to us, I always say, you're going to get exposure on everything. It's kind of like you can take it where you want to take it. And so not all programs are equal in that way. And certainly you got to talk to the other students that are in that program.
Sure.
And, ours is also such that some people might come in and go, well, I don't want to have to take history. I don't have to take these things. But, we find that it's a really great educational balance, certainly from even my point of view. When I got out and I was working in production, I could talk to the production groups coming in, like just during lunch and things about, film history and Jackie Chan movies and all these things that I was much more engaged with these clientele coming in than a lot of the other people I was working with, because I had that background, that knowledge background, because they're very highly, knowledgeable about film history, people who are really successful, regardless of, courses they've taken. So it is a good investigative thing. And I also think it's important when you go in, you get a sense of where the professors are coming from. Like, what have we done? What are we doing now? How is that transferable knowledge and skill going to apply to the work that you're going to be doing, in our program.
Mm-hmm.
So
I want to get to that red camera.
Yeah, I was about to ask it. Yeah. You said red camera. Obviously, I know there's something to it. Can you lay out for us what is the red digital camera, and how are you affiliated, and what does all that mean?
So red, red's, compared to a lot of camera companies like, Canon and Sony and such, it's a fairly new company, coming out just, 15 years ago or so. Jim Jaynard started the company who owned Oakley sunglasses. Okay. And so he wanted to make a camera system because he wanted to shoot his own, he was doing his own commercials and things like that. And he wanted to create this own camera system. And he went to the board and said, I want to do this. They said no. So he sold the company for $1 billion and went ahead and made his own camera company. They had come out with that Red One, which is the first 4K camera at the time. And it was affordable by the scheme of things, at like $17,500. If we were shooting on Betacam at the time, you were paying $80,000. If you're shooting on film, you're paying, more than that for film cameras, plus, the media. So it's kind of revolutionary in that way. And now when you see things on TV or in the movies, generally, something's going to be shot on Red or Arri, Arri Alexas, which would be very, very popular within the Hollywood system. Sony Venice is now, coming up, and that shot Maverick. And so these are all high resolution, raw systems that, you can manipulate and do a lot of things with. And so, Red has managed to actually hold a pretty solid marketplace on wildlife documentary because it's accessible. It's much more affordable. It provides, high resolution images. And so we adopted Red One very early on when actually our science department had gotten one for doing facial recognition work. And so I was tagged with, how do I make this thing work? And then we got donated one. And then we've kind of stuck with that format throughout the years. And now I do a lot of their education, what they call education classes. So I'm doing a lot of work actually with another company, Wild Motion, that we are now taking over that branch from Red Digital Cinema. And, we just did one at Jackson Wild, and, we'll do a number of these different programs. So now our program when you get up to that upper level, it's Red camera based. So if you know the file structure, you know how to work with it, all these things you've already, you've kind of already been through that game. When you get out, kids who come out and go, what this is at least.
Yeah.
And then they can media manage, or, they can do any number of, things because they understand the ecosystem of how that camera works. So, we have a number of different ones. I mean, we go through, Canons to Blackmagics to, Red cameras. So you kind of make your way, through a number of different systems, but that's where we are now.
I think some really cool that I took from the whole kind of explanation of it was in the beginning, you were talking about being in charge of kind of the digital education at Notre Dame. And now you have this Red camera organization, and you have like the training mechanism that you use it kind of cross pollinates into the public sector and the education sector. And you're doing similar work, it sounds like, for Notre Dame itself and its digital education and the filmmaking. But then also you're now applying the training mechanism that you've created to helping this camera company teach people how to use it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the best way to learn how to do something is learn how to teach it.
Yeah, without question.
And being able to explain it, and, being able to work with people like I was mentioning earlier, that are in a number of different fields. And then also just doing gratifying work. Like I worked with an organization called NUF in South Africa, and I'm hoping to go back again in February and do a whole workshops just to train Africa-based filmmakers, these systems, so that when groups come in, they get hired to do the work instead of people, bringing in a lot of people from the outside, like, BBC crews and things like that. They'll actually hire those people to do that kind of thing. So, for me, it's both education, but it's also that kind of networking and, hey, discovering new things and new applications, and somebody will bring in, have another skill set, and we're using lenses that I don't typically use. And so it's always a learning process for me as well. And I really enjoy it just because, you just get to meet great people and, have that kind of network expand. And, always kind of figuring out new stuff, like, who's using what and who's discovering what, and I'll use this next time. And, it's a constant learning process, just constant.
Sure. I mean, the changing landscape. I mean, if you go back 20 years, I mean, was HD even a thing? Right. I mean, and now we're talking, HD, 1080p, 4K. I mean,
yeah,
it's ever evolving. I mean, it's constantly evolving. I mean, think about, again, you talk about influencers now and how accessible things are. People can use a phone to shoot a high quality image and video. I mean, the advancement of film photo over a short period of time has been tremendous. And I would imagine it's going to continue down that pathway. So the education side of it, I would imagine there has to be a foundation that as these things evolve, you kind of know where it came from. That gives you a better understanding, I would imagine. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's again, I think it's why it is such a great field potentially to be in, because you don't want to be in something that's dying, right? You want something that has a future. And this obviously is something that will continue to evolve tremendously over the years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely will. And then there's always, I'm fascinated with all these people that do new innovations just to make parts and things, and whole industries that spawn off of, one camera system or multiple camera systems. And then they sort of, create these things and kind of exploring that option as well. Where can you go from there to, create something else to make something work,
Joe, I'm laughing because I remember when I got a 2 megapixel camera, and it was like the end of, like, you can't get a better camera.
Yeah.
And now you've got like 20 megapixels in a phone anymore. So it's crazy.
Yeah. I battled to get to HD when we got these HVX, 200s. Like, why do we have to do that and go to HD? And like, well, because it's the future, it's like, that's where we're going, and like we talk about now, even with red stuff, it's like, people scoffed at 4K, can you buy a 1080 TV now? You can get small monitors now, these little college TVs, because I had to buy those, but that's where we are.
I joke. So my youngest wants to wrestle, and at first he thought I signed up. I said, "Yeah, I signed you up for wrestling," and he's like, "All right," thinking it's like WWF. I go, no. And I said, Dad wrestled. He goes, "You did?" I said, "Oh yeah." I transferred a bunch of the old videotapes that we have onto YouTube. And so I put it on the big screen, and it's the box. It's all grainy. Yeah. And my daughter goes, "God, you guys looked bad back then." Yeah. Like, I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Look at the picture. Like that's what you got." I'm like, "Oh, no idea." Like static on a TV, forget it. Like, it's just, it's just amazing. The visualization, like they got iPads, they got 4K in their hands. Yeah. It's insane. But sorry, I got off track there.
I think it's also fascinating. It's a battle between the ability to shoot it and the ability to show it, right? Mm-hmm. Because for a long time the televisions didn't have the capability of the cameras, and you're kind of going back and forth, and you can record in higher definition, but you can't display it in higher definition. And now it's sort of that constant battle back and forth, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it was whether or not, you've got a 4K, but is it streaming 4K? Or, you're seeing things in HDR, and all that stuff's going to be catching up. I mean, our thing is that, when I say us, I mean, when I'm working with Red, is when you shoot in a higher resolution, as you bring it down, it looks better. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's always going to be as you start down sampling that way. And one great example that we give is that I Love Lucy, Desilu wanted to shoot in 35 millimeter, but none of that stuff was shown in 35 millimeter. Yeah. By the time it gets transferred, and we've got this great, you transfer it down, it goes to tape, it's going out to tube televisions, it looks one way, but then when you look at the actual frame and remastered, it's just amazing, so you have this future-proof ability to, have these images. And that's where film was always, saying, well, everything, we're going to archive everything on film. And a lot of stuff does get archived on film because it's got that kind of future-proof resolution going forward versus just drives.
So I want to circle back on kind of the interdisciplinary collaborations and stuff, because some of that sounds awesome. And then also I will get to the endurance part of your lifestyle, which I'm assuming there's a substantial amount of video creation you're doing. And you know, there's a little bit of GoPro conversation in that. I'm sure we're well advanced on GoPro, right? But from the interdisciplinary standpoint, I was trying to figure out where it doesn't apply, and I can't. I mean, I feel like every discipline, there's video technology or production necessary to educate or communicate anything anymore, right? In any subject matter.
Yeah. I mean, part of it for us too is talking about everybody's got a phone, you know, and you can shoot these high-end things, but really to make it look and sound good, you know, is also a challenge. Like, and there's little things here and there, you know, shooting against windows, you know, all these kinds of things, you know. So people will come in saying, well, I've been making media all this time, but, you know, how do we make it better? How do we make it stand up to, you know, these captivating shows you're seeing on television and streaming networks, you know, that kind of thing. But like the interdisciplinary things that I'm doing now is actually what we call visual anthropology. So I've been working with an archaeologist, and, you know, we created a class that, you know, takes kids from multiple disciplines, and we go document local barns, and kind of learn what that visual language is, bring them back. And that's when you actually get, you know, you get different students that were in history, or they're in, you know, they're going into medicine, and suddenly they discover this other passion for, you know, doing that kind of work. And now, you know, there's recording surgeries, and there's, you know, all these kinds of things, or like these NGO kind of things that we were talking about. You know, it's funny because a lot of different majors now will ask for media, and then they'll come to us and go, well, we actually have a whole department, you know, within the college that says, oh, you can take out any of these other cameras just to create stuff, because it's always been an option now that you're creating media in one way or another. You know, we just want to take it to a higher standard.
So I think continuing in some of the stuff that you've done, I also want to understand the software side of it, because I've got on editing software and lost my mind.
Yeah.
But no formal training whatsoever, trying to figure it out, and simple programs. I got to imagine some of the software packages are just immense. How much time do students spend on the editing and the learning of software and things like that? And is there a general language of editing software that sort of they all use? So if you learn one, you know them all, or is it you got to be specific and detailed on that?
There's a certain language, certainly when you have clips and you have video tracks, you have audio tracks, they're typically stacked, and, you know, those kinds of things. But there is a big muscle memory resistance to changing a lot, you know. So if you go back to the story of, you know, Final Cut, and everybody used Final Cut 7, and then they went to Final Cut 10, and nobody can get their heads wrapped around what they were doing. You know, it sort of went back to the iMovie sort of look and feel. And now it's progressed to the point where it's got a niche market. It kind of got away from typical Hollywood kind of stuff. But certain people who use it really, really like that. Certain networks, they all use Avid, right? I mean, Avid's got kind of its own system, but again, it's video tracks on the top. You know, you've got playback, you've got, you know, your clip, you know, windows and things of that nature. You've got bins, you know, that kind of language. But again, it's like, you know, they've been doing it so long, they've invested in an infrastructure. They're using just, you know, proxy clips, and then they spit it out. You know, where it's really going now is, you know, everybody's using Premiere as part of Creative Cloud, right? And so but now you need a subscription, you use Creative Cloud, but all these programs are really, you know, after editing, they're then going over to other programs. So like you're sending things to Pro Tools, you're sending things to Resolve really now. So I've switched actually everything to Resolve, and I did that partly because of the pandemic, because you could get Resolve for free. It had reached a point where, you know, their editing platform had become very, very robust. And where I'm seeing when we're doing classes is a lot of people are looking to move that way because color management is so important. And Avid doesn't care about color management. Everything else is sort of shifting that way. Premiere, you can kind of do certain things, but really when you're color grading, which becomes a really important last step in higher end productions, they're trying to port those things over. So even within our department that I work here, we moved everything to Resolve, and a lot of people are trying to do that. But like you said, yeah, there's a terminology there, but there's also like, well, I like the way it does this, and I like the way it does that, and I've got to figure out different keyboard strokes, and I just jumped in and just started learning it. And once it takes over, you go, it's hard for me to actually go backwards now if I could open up a Premiere project, because I just like what Resolve is doing. So in our program now, we have Premiere in some of the classes, and then I'm now using Resolve.
And so is there coursework specifically around editing? I would assume that, and you're actually getting into that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a course. We had an adjunct come in that was doing like fix it in post and like sound and things like that, which were really good additions. Right now, it's like you learn how to use Premiere and Intro, then you're learning Resolve, so you're sort of moving over in my class because of where we're going to get to the end game. So you spend time in those, but right now I can't dedicate. I'm still concentrating on shooting and lighting and all these other things.
Got it. Yeah.
So partly it's like here's a lot of tutorials that there's so much information out there that you can learn that process. And somebody actually came in when I was traveling and did the post process. Now you got to get in there and learn it. And at the end, they always say, well, we spend more time doing this. I just, they always think you have more time. I never have enough time to go through everything. So, we really need to make sure I think we offer just those kind of editing technical skills classes. But, that's the kind of stuff that, we've all just learned on the fly. Get it. Like they always want things handed to them. You go, yeah, but none of us took courses. Like we just sat down with the stuff and you learned it. Right. And there's so much like online tutorials now that I hand out and go, well, you could have done it. You just got to do it.
Yeah. We got to take the initiative on it.
Get your head wrapped around it. So
final question from me. Is there a commonality in students that seem to be successful as they're coming through your program, or as they're coming through the school at Notre Dame, Department of Film, Television, and Theater? What type of student in the high school, like who should be considering this stuff as a focus?
A commonality between those who are successful.
Bingo.
Yeah. Dedication. I mean, it's dedication, it's resilience, knowing that there's, a certain element of uncertainty, but, I had a great class last year. We had a final, event with parents. So I just said, I had the most fun this year because everybody was into it. I'm very into it. So like, if you're looking distracted, then, I just don't, you've got too many other things, or you're not dedicated to what we need to do to make this happen. And they all were, they wanted to make these things. They wanted to make it with their talented group. So you have to have that element of dedication, to what you're learning in school, and then the application of that, and then where you're going to go. But you also have to have that resilience of, knowing it's a little tougher, when you get out. I mean, I got out, I was making $8 an hour bending rebar, building rock formations at Universal. It's not exactly an easy road, but I got here.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. My last question, a little bit more personal, not necessarily tied down to this, but I did mention that when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to get into the film, or just the aspects of it, but it was mainly editing. Because it's funny, my entire life, I remember 2 classes, one in college, which was critical thinking, and 2 was senior year of high school, which was, the study of film. And we studied Jaws. And it changed my world about how I watch films and just editing and how masterful the editing in that movie is. Is there a film that you teach or that you have watched that has kind of changed, like your standout on what film is versus just sitting down and watching it and enjoying a film to actually, this is an art form? Is there anything that you would stand out you can recommend that I could watch? I'm just curious if you had a take on that.
All right. So my favorite movie, like you're saying, people will come up, and when you really notice directing, was Raiders of the Lost Ark. When you really see, and there's a great article where somebody talks about this is actually directing, like, you seeing what's happening and blocking and all these things that are going on within that film itself. I don't actually use that film a lot, but that was kind of like a formulating base for for me loving movies. Really, I think anything else. I had been using a lot, from an editing standpoint. I mean, I use American Beauty a lot when I'm talking about cinematography because I love Conrad Hall, and the simplicity of what he was doing is very accessible. But I've been doing a lot with No Country for Old Men and Sicario recently. I listened to the Teen Deacons podcast a lot. I did it actually before this one when I was outside earlier today. And, kind of getting a real sense of, what those decisions are being made in both coverage and, and in shooting it, so like there's a whole scene in Sicario where, Villeneuve says, well, we could go get coverage, but if I do, I might use it. And it's perfect the way it is. It's like, you just have to get around that. I think it's exploring that mindset with students and going, they shouldn't have that kind of coverage yet to get away with that one thing, but that's where kind of you go with it. So those are kind of the films I'm using now. Going on what you're saying about Jaws, I mean, everybody should watch Visions of Light if you can find it. I make, all my classes watch that because it's a great history of cinematography and the choices. Like Jaws, they said was the biggest budget handheld movie ever made because on a boat, you don't want to be on a tripod. Right. How they were going to do that kind of work. So yeah, those and Tree of Life is actually from a completely different standpoint. Tree of Life is also, I think, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question. What's more important, pre-production or post-production?
Wow. When my class comes out, they have to write a paper at the end. The predominant viewpoint is always pre-production. Like they feel like, had I been more prepared, this would have gone smoother, but you've got people that are editing while the movie's made in post-production kind of thing. And I understand that, but from their standpoint in retrospect was always like, I needed to spend more time on pre-production. I need, and I'm always sort of hammering that home so that because they think it's going to be easier than it is, and it isn't. No, so if you can get through that, then post-production, then I think takes care of itself. So, I think I'd have to go with that.
Yeah.
Love it. This has been awesome. Yeah. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. And again, thank you again for the tour when I was up there a couple weeks back. I was hoping when we came on today, Notre Dame would have had 11 guys on the field and beat Ohio State, but we won't get into that, But no, yeah, thank you so much for the tour. Thank you for being, guest on today's show. And I hope to, maybe next time I get up to Notre Dame, I'll drop in and say hello.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, this has been College Knowledge with Professor William Donaruma. I almost screwed it up. Donaruma.
Right.
At University of Notre Dame. Here at Elite Collegiate Planning, we're able to send students to private schools for nearly a fraction of the cost of public schools. Visit our website, elitecollegiateplanning.com, to learn more. Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.